All right, let's talk about one of the heavyweights of modern philosophy, Martin Heidegger. You've probably heard the name, but his ideas, they can feel like this dense, tangled forest that's impossible to navigate. Well, today we're going to hack a path right through it, because we're not just looking at a guy with new ideas, we're looking at someone who tried to fundamentally change how we think about, well, thinking itself.
So, right off the bat, let's just get this out of the way. This isn't hype. We're talking about someone who's put in the same league as Plato, Kant, and Nietzsche. I mean, when those are your comparisons, you're not just playing the game anymore. You've completely rewritten the rules. The real question is, how?
And just look at this list. It shows you the sheer scale of his impact. This was not some niche academic writing for a handful of people. His work was like an earthquake. The epicenter was in 1920s Germany, but the shockwaves completely reshaped everything. Existentialism, critical theory, psychoanalysis. The biggest names of the 20th century, Foucault, Derrida, you name it, they all had to wrestle with Heidegger's ideas.
So, how did one thinker have such a massive impact? Well, it all goes back to a single, gigantic question. A question that drove his entire career and one he believed Western philosophy had somehow managed to forget for more than 2,000 years.
This is it. I know, it sounds so simple it's almost childish, right? Why is there stuff instead of no stuff? But for Heidegger, this was everything. He basically argued that since the ancient Greeks, we've gotten so obsessed with studying things, what he called beings, that we completely forgot to ask the most basic question of all: what does it even mean to be? We forgot about being with a capital B.
To really get what he's after, you have to understand this one crucial distinction. On one side, you've got beings, das Seiende. That's everything you can point to: a chair, a planet, an idea, a person. But on the other side, you have being, das Sein, and that's not a thing at all. It's the background reality, the isness of everything, that allows any of those specific things to show up for us in the first place.
Here's a great way to think about it. You can spend your whole life studying the pawns, the knights, the queens, the individual beings on the board. But to truly understand the game of chess, you have to investigate the invisible rules that allow them to move and exist. Heidegger wanted to stop looking at the pieces and start investigating the rulebook of reality itself.
Okay, so if you want to study the invisible rules of being, where do you even start? You can't put being under a microscope. Well, Heidegger's answer was totally revolutionary. He said you have to start with the only being in the entire universe that actually cares about being. The one being who walks around wondering, what does it all mean? And that's us.
So he needed a new word for us. He couldn't just use human or person. He felt those terms were loaded with centuries of philosophical baggage. So he came up with his own term, Dasein. And it refers specifically to the kind of entity we are, the kind of being that asks questions about being.
And the German word itself is a giant clue. Da means there or here, and Sein means being. So Dasein literally means being there. We are the there where being happens. Think of us as the clearing in the forest where the world can show up and actually matter.
Now, according to Heidegger, design has a few unique features. First, we are always being in the world. We're not separate minds looking at an outside world. We're already tangled up in it. Second, we experience thrownness. We're just dropped into a life in a world that we didn't choose. Third, we're always projecting ourselves toward the future, defining ourselves by our possibilities. And maybe most importantly, unlike a rock or a squirrel, our own existence is a constant question for us. We're the animals who worry about what it means to be.
Okay, so once he established this new way of looking at human existence, he used it as a launch pad for some incredibly powerful critiques of modern life. And we're going to dive into two of his most famous ideas, one about death and the other about technology.
The first pillar is being toward death. And I know it sounds super gloomy, but hang on, because for Heidegger, it's actually the key to living a meaningful life. It's not about being morbid, it's about what facing our own mortality makes possible.
So here's the crucial point. For Heidegger, death isn't just an event at the end of your life. It's your own most potentiality. It is the one possibility that is absolutely, 100%, undeniably yours. No one can die your death for you. And he says that when you truly, genuinely confront this fact,
It changes everything.
He said we basically have two ways to live. The inauthentic way is to run away from the thought of death. We just get lost in the noise of the they, what people say, what you're supposed to do, all the distractions until it's all over. The other path, the authentic path, is to face your mortality head-on. Because when you do that, it frees you from all that petty, everyday chatter and allows you to finally choose a life that is truly your own. All right, the second pillar is his famous take on technology. And again, when he says technology, he's not just talking about your phone or a new app. For Heidegger, technology is something much deeper. It's a whole way of seeing and relating to the world.
He draws this amazing contrast. The ancient Greeks had a word, techne, and for them, it meant something like a gentle, poetic bringing forth, like a sculptor slowly revealing a statue that was already hidden inside the marble. Modern technology, on the other hand, doesn't gently reveal. It aggressively challenges and demands. It looks at a river and demands electricity. It looks at a mountain and demands ore. The world stops being a partner and becomes what he calls a standing reserve. Just a stockpile of resources waiting to be optimized.
And you guessed it, he had a special word for this modern mindset. Gestell, which we translate as inframing. Just think of it like putting a frame around the entire world that only lets you see it as a resource to be managed. A forest isn't a forest, it's timber. A river isn't a river, it's hydroelectric potential. Even people become human resources. And here's where he spots the profound danger. The problem with end-framing isn't that it's evil or bad. The problem is that it's so powerful and so successful that it becomes the only way we know how to see. It closes off all other possibilities. We forget that a forest could be anything but timber. We're wearing glasses that only show us things to be used, and we forget we even have them on.
But you cannot talk about Heidegger's immense philosophical influence without also confronting the deeply, deeply troubling part of his own life and legacy.
First, let's just state the facts. His importance to philosophy is staggering. His collected works are enormous and still being translated, and more academic papers are published about him every year than pretty much anyone else. To understand the 20th century, you have to go through Heidegger.
But that entire legacy is forever stained by his politics. In 1933, he became rector of his university, and he enthusiastically joined the Nazi Party. Now, he resigned from that post about a year later, but his involvement was real, it was deep, and it forces this question that scholars are still fiercely debating. How, if at all, does his philosophy connect to his Nazism? Late in his life, he gave an interview that was only published after he died. He was asked, what hope is there for us? How do we escape this technological inframing you've been warning us about? His response was chilling. He simply said, "Only a God can save us." It was this profoundly pessimistic statement, a suggestion that we've created a mindset that's now beyond our own control.
And in the end, that's really the question his work leaves us with. His entire philosophy is like a massive warning sign. He was afraid that we'd get so good at manipulating all the things in the world, we'd forget to even ask the question of what it means to be in the first place. So we have to look at our own world, a world saturated with technology designed to optimize everything, and ask ourselves, are we hearing his warning, or are we just proving him right?